Hey everybody, I'm Lance Rubin, and this is Really Deep Conversations with YA Authors, Episode 4. I took a little break, but now coming back strong with an amazing guest, David Levithan. An incredible author, also happens to be an incredible editor at Scholastic, and also happens to be an incredible person. He's written many, many books. They include his first one, Boy Meets Boy, a funny, beautiful, soulful gay romantic comedy from 2003. Every Day, which is about A, who is our genderless protagonist who wakes up in a new body every day. Nick and Norah's Infinite Playlist that he wrote with Rachel Cohn. Really great One Night in New York City book. And You Know Me Well just came out the beginning of June. I have not read it yet, but look at this beautiful cover. He wrote it with Nina LaCour. Seems great. Let's talk with David.
I feel like I'm getting to know you in a whole new way. Really deep conversations with YA authors.
So I'm here with David Levithan. I'm so excited.
I'm here with Lance Rubin. I'm excited too.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. David this is like such a coup to have you doing this interview because you are not only an incredible author, an incredible editor, but you're also, I like to think of it, I think others do too, the mayor of YA. Being that you're an author, editor, and you kind of have brought the community together and are consistently bringing the community together with readings, festivals, even just, just the way you're so kind to me when I was a new author in 2015. I feel like, some authors might get jaded and hard and bitter once they've been writing books.
Once we've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, but you have such an open-hearted presence, and so thank you. Even the fact that you're doing this, interview show with me right now is a testament to that. So thank you for being here. I guess I want to, start at the beginning of your journey, since you have such a unique career within the publishing world, working on both sides of it. How did that begin? I mean, and was that always your intention to kind of write books as well as edit them?
I mean, the editorial side started first. I mean, we're here. This is my office. Right?
Yeah, it's such a nice office.
So this is where it all began. It's actually a different building, but then it's been in this building for about 22 years, so that counts.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. When I was 19, when I was between my sophomore and junior year, I applied for an internship. The only publishing internship in the Brown Career Library was Scholastic, and I was like, oh, a children's book, that sounds cool. Like thinking like Clifford the Big Red Dog, like
right.
Which is Scholastic, but thinking, okay, that'll be fun, but sort of the pretentious literary side of me, not really knowing that would end up being my calling. And by sheer luck, I originally was assigned to the Science magazine and the Scholastic magazine division, and then very tactfully explained that the reason I'd gone to Brown was because I would never have to take a science or math class ever again. Nice. And that while the requirement was sort of knowing science at a 6th grade level, I wasn't entirely sure that I could do that.
Yeah, I totally relate.
They were nice enough to switch me to the book department, and then a couple of weeks before I showed up, one of the editorial assistants left, and so they reassigned me to Bethany Buck, who was then the editor of the Babysitters Club series. And I'd heard of it. I had not read one. I did not know that soon my career path would be to be paid to think like a 13-year-old girl. But that first summer, I learned that was the path that I was meant to walk.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and have been here ever since, and still work with Ann Martin, the Babysitters Club author, now 24 years later.
So cool.
So I did that for 10 years, and I really loved working with other authors and playing with other people's words. And while I'd done a few series books and movie tie-ins and things, it wasn't until I had this idea for what I thought was a short story that turned into a YA novel that I really went to the author side.
So then you did write this book, Boy Meets Boy, which I
know that book. Yeah,
you familiar with it?
Yeah.
I actually just read it a month ago, and I loved it so much. I'm just wondering about. So you just said that you had this idea for it, and what was the idea? Was it kind of a response to books you weren't seeing out there? Was it an homage to books that already existed? Where was the creative impulse coming from?
In general, the spark was every year since my junior year of high school, I've written a story for my friends for Valentine's Day. So I wish I could say like November or October, but basically like January rolls around. I'm like, okay, it's time to write a story. It's
That's
like
so
I have to
amazing.
set it out.
And
February 14th.
you've continued doing this.
Yes, yeah, no, it's still continued. So that's a lot of stories for those of you doing math in the audience. And so one year this story began, and specifically I can remember the conversation that began the story was I was talking to my best friend from high school, Carrie's best friend out in Washington, Rodney, who is gay.
Okay.
And I was visiting out there. My best friend Carrie moved out to Washington State, and I was visiting him and met Rodney and really liked him. And just one night we were talking, and it was really fascinating to me because we were both gay. And he had grown up with really conservative parents in the Midwest. I grew up with really liberal Jewish parents in New Jersey and had a gay uncle who brought boyfriends to Thanksgiving. So our upbringings were extraordinarily different. And hearing his story, and that's what it's all about, is sharing stories and the power of that. And hearing his story made me want to go back and just write a story for teenage him. Like it wasn't teenage me that I was very concerned about, but it was teenage him that I was like, oh wow, I want to create the opposite of his experience. I want to create a world where, yeah, being gay is totally fine. Yeah. Nothing bad happens. Parents understand. And just sort of instead of reflecting reality, just create reality. And so I started with what is now the second chapter of Boy Meets Boy, with just Paul telling the story about, oh, I've been gay since kindergarten, and my kindergarten teacher outed me to my parents, and this and that and the other thing. And it just flowed from there. And as I said before, I thought I was writing a short story for my friends, and it got longer and longer and longer. And basically I tricked myself into writing my first novel, which is a great way to do it. Like if I had sat down and been like, I am now writing my first novel, I'd still be writing it. We wouldn't be talking today. Yeah. But I tricked myself into doing it, and about halfway through realized that I was totally writing the YA novel that I wanted to find as an editor, that the history of gay YA literature, and it really was gay YA literature, it wasn't even LGBT YA literature at that time, was one of misery and depression, and if anybody finds out that you're gay, your world will end. And we had just started to get to the point where like the happy ending was you would find one other outsider, and together you could be outsiders, and that was it. Yeah. And it was like, come on, can't we just have a romantic comedy? Can't we just have a dippy, happy story where you're just in love with a boy and it's just complicated? Yeah. And so I wrote that, and another huge influence was Francesca Lia Block and her books, specifically Weetzie Bat and Baby Bebop. Yeah. So it told me that, yeah, you can write a happy gay story, and that was the first time I had seen that in YA. So I wrote it. And the cool part was that at the same time, Brett Hartinger was writing Geography Club, and Julianne Peters was writing Keeping You a Secret, and Maureen Johnson was writing The Bermuda's Triangle, and Alex Sanchez was writing his Rainbow books. And I think all of us wanted to sort of change it up and wanted to really show the complexities and the possibilities of LGBT YA life. And so all of us had books that came out, I think within an 18-month period, like all of our books came out and totally changed the tide. And
now since Boy Meets Boy came out, and you've written many other fantastic books that could be considered part of the LGBT canon, what are books that you feel like have changed the game, or that you just love?
Oh, I mean, like, there's so many of them. I mean, I think, besides all the ones that I just mentioned, I think James Howe's Totally Joe and the Misfits for the middle grade was really the first time where that, like, free-spirited character who is gay and totally okay with it, that was just amazing to me to see. Recently, I think what Alex London does with his books, like Proxy, really just taking into genre and being like, hey, this action hero can be gay, and that's not the point of the book, is pretty cool. Yeah, it's fantastic. I edited a book called George, written by Alex Gino, which is the love of my life, which is a middle grade trans novel that really, it did exactly what we wanted it to do. Like, it was a world changer, and it just really has done miracles.
Obviously, the publishing industry is making moves, I'd say, in the past 3 years, with We Need Diverse Books coming on the scene, and everybody really starting to open their eyes and understand, like, oh, yes, we do have a problem here, and it's a severe lack of representation for many groups. Right. as the mayor of YA, how do you think it's going?
No, I think it's going well. I mean, I'm constantly telling the We Need Diverse Books people that it's extraordinary because change is happening, and it is happening because they raise their voices. That again, Absolutely. It was not that there wasn't the intention to have diverse voices and diverse fiction. That always, if you go into children's publishing, hopefully it's in your nature to want that. And again, I've never seen pushback against that in all of my years here at Scholastic. But again, I think that you needed the culture at large to be energized and to be focusing on it and to support the books and to support the authors. And you needed to create an infrastructure for everybody who was trying to get to this goal to really come together and work for it. And I think that's what We Need Diverse Books has done. Yeah. So I think it's been huge. I mean, it's been amazing to see. I mean, again, looking at George, I think that they immediately were like, yes, we need middle grade trans voices. Like, that absolutely is a part of it. And they embraced the book and embraced the author immediately. And that did help. And then certainly with my books, that it has helped. And it also really has raised the consciousness of sort of looking at what's on the list and looking at specifically who you're giving books to. I still tell the story. I said it at a We Need Diverse Books panel at BEA, that I became conscious of the fact that when people at conventions came up to us and were like, oh, I want a book for a 9-year-old girl, immediately them saying girl, you would reach for a certain galley or reach for a certain thing. And I said, we have to stop that. We have to just, if we're going to really believe that readers are readers, we have to push back about that. You can't be rude and be like, why are you saying 9-year-old girl, not 9-year-old student? But give them the book that they're not expecting to get. And if they challenge that, say, no, of course, whatever, a girl, you don't have to be a girl in order to appreciate whatever, and Kate DiCamillo. You don't have to be a boy to appreciate Wonder. Like, it's just like, it's such a ridiculous notion. Yeah. But again, there has to be a consciousness about it, which I think is great.
Right. It's so ingrained to think that way. Like,
totally. That everybody wants the book that reflects who they are or what they look like, and that's just the case.
Right, exactly. That's the opposite of how to build empathy.
Yeah.
If you're just, going to the pile of books that look like you. What is your writing? What does your writing schedule look like? And are you very consistent and specific with when you write?
No.
Okay.
I mean, basically, I carve out weekends or weeks and just write. I mean, like, I'm lucky in that sort of when I'm not writing, the writing part of my brain is still working. So when I sit down, usually there's something there. But yeah, no, it's a little, it's not, I don't wake up at 6 a.m. and start writing and then go to work. I certainly don't write at the end of the day, because after I've dealt with other people's words all day, the last thing I want to do is write. So it really becomes like, what are the days that I can devote to writing? And so, again, weekends and vacations tend to be it.
Are you always working on a book, though? Have you ever had stretches where it's like, no, I'm just doing the editing right now?
Partially because of the collaborations that I do. Usually there's something that's going.
Okay.
Because the collaborations I do usually almost always involve emailing chapters back and forth. And so there's a time that you're on, and then there's a time you're not on. That's much easier to juggle.
That sounds nice.
It is really nice. Let me tell you, only being responsible for one chapter at a time, it's a beautiful thing, Lance.
Really? Oh, yeah. No, I got to try that whole collaboration thing. And you and Nina LaCour had never collaborated. This is your first collaboration.
We had, in fact, we were trying to figure out, we think we had met maybe 3 times before we started talking about writing together. Okay. So, yeah, we did not know each other very well, ironically enough.
Just 3 times? Oh, my God, that's amazing. Yeah. And then... Did it work out well?
Yeah, no, it totally did. I mean, like, my instincts are pretty good about this stuff. But starting with Nick and Norah, because that was the first, and Rachel gets all the credit for pushing me into this whole collaboration thing, because it was her idea. That, like, one day over a meal, amusingly, we disagree as to whether it was lunch or dinner or where it was, but she was saying that she really wanted to write a he said, she said novel with a guy writer, and I was like, Pick me. I'm a guy writer. And she's like, you. And then she basically said, it's about two kids named Nick and Nora. They're from New Jersey. They're in New York for one night. Go write the first chapter, David. I was like, awesome. And then for 3 weeks, I was like, who are Nick and Nora? What are they doing?
Yeah.
And then in the strange way that the mind or the writing mind works, or at least my writing mind works, I was just riding the bus home one day and I was like, Nick is the straight bassist in a queercore band. I was like, okay, where are you going with this? And I was like, and he is playing and he looks into the audience and he sees his ex-girlfriend. And I just got home, started writing, and wrote the whole first chapter in one sitting.
Oh my
At the very end of the chapter, he meets this girl, Nora. And then I was excited. I was like, I don't even know if I'd probably read it over once, but I might not have even done that. And then I emailed it over to Rachel. And I thought, oh, we'll talk about it. She'll tell me what she thinks, etc. And then a few days later, there was chapter 2. I was like, oh, I guess we're not going to talk about it. And we didn't. We just sent it back and forth. And you get to live the story alongside your characters in a bizarre way. Because they don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. And it's really fun. But Rachel and I, it's like, it went so well. It's like when you're driving and you're like hitting every single green light, and like the more it happens, the more you're like, this can't actually be happening. This is too, like, this can't, it's gonna end, oh my god. And it takes on this bizarrely magical quality. Like, that is what writing Nick and Nora was about. Like, we had never collaborated before. We had no idea whether it was gonna work, and we had such an incredible time. So once you get a fix of that, you want to keep coming back for more. And obviously Rachel and I have, our 4th book is coming out in October. But then I was curious about what it would be like with other people and sort of trying different ways. Like the he said, she said, back and forth, contemporary with that's what I do with Rachel. And so everything else that I have done, whether it's Invisibility with Andrea Cremer, where it's paranormal, whether it's Will Grayson, which is not back and forth, it was shaped more like an X. Or with Nina, it's he said, she said, but both of them are gay. So it's not the romantic comedy where you're like, oh, they're going to end up together at the end. Instead, it's like, oh, well, what does it become about then if it's not a romantic between the two leads?
What was the quick origin story of you and Andrea being like, let's do a book?
Oh, that was, I mean, that... I always put the caveat of the story being like, don't try this now. I've done it once. I will not do it again. But she actually did an event with me and John when Nightshade, her first book, was coming out. And she went home that night and blogged. She and I had only met each other for a total of an hour. I loved her. Like, within 10 minutes, I was serenading her with You've Lost That Loving Feeling. But she wrote in her blog, she was like, she joked about how John's fans were going to take over the world and make it a better place, which they are. And then with me, she would joke, she's like, okay, so when are you going to write a book with me, David Levithan? Like, isn't it about time you did paranormal? And I totally saw it and was like, all right, game on. And I was like, paranormal, what do I want to do? I was like, don't want to do vampire, don't want to do werewolf, like, and then was like, invisibility. I've always wanted to do invisibility. And so I wrote a first chapter and sent it to her without warning her. Got her email address, I think, off of her website. And and it's too bad that she is not here to tell the story because she tells it much better. She happened to be like in the middle of a family reunion at the time and got this email and just started shrieking. And everyone was like, what's going on? What's going on? And it was just very hard for her to explain. Like, I'm writing a book with somebody. Yeah. I was joking. But
so cool.
Yeah.
And I love just how game you are to like follow the creative impulse and be like, yeah, let's write a book. Like,
yeah, I mean, because what do you have to lose? I mean, like, it's always a secret for at least the first half. Yeah. So it's like, if it doesn't go well, then nobody will know, and you're like, okay, that was a good try. But
have you had any secret collaborations that fell apart?
It would not be a secret if I told you.
I don't want to know who it was with. I just want to know if they've ever existed. Yeah, that's so fun. And then John Green, what was that? The Will Grayson.
That was, I mean, it was he and I became friends for the best possible reason with authors that I read Looking for Alaska. I totally loved it. He had been a fan of Boy Meets Boy, and so I was the first author to email him on his website, like before Looking for Alaska came out. It was sort of, I think it was still in arts. And he was working for Booklist at the time, and so we just ended up, it's funny, today is a Friday afternoon, he and I, Friday afternoons when work was really slow, we just pick up the phone and just talk for like half hour, an hour, just about what's going on, books we'd read, etc. And I always wanted to do a book about people with the same name because in college, one of my best friends was named David Leventhal, and so a lot of confusion from that. And I thought, well, that confusion, it could go places. And so I just was talking to John one day. I was like, hey, I've always wanted to do this book. And so we figured out what the name was. I picked the first name. He picked the last name. We figured out when and where they would meet. And then we wrote our first chapters at the same time. So it was definitely different.
So cool. It's so fun to hear about that. 'Cause it just kind of opens your mind to the possibilities. Like, anybody can write books with anybody.
Right, that's the hope, at least.
Right? Just to jump back to Nick and Norah, because I see the plaque behind you. That
yes, that was from the director's chair.
Oh, I thought so.
All right.
What was the experience of the movie? Like, how much did you have to do with that? Were you just on set a little bit or a lot? Or
oh my God, it was so awesome. Rachel and I have been extraordinarily charmed. I'm knocking wood. I mean, like, we've had 2 movies. We love them both. Nick and Norah was like the best movie experience you could possibly have. Like, loved the director, loved the stars, loved the screenplay. And for me, it was crazy because the whole book takes place in New York over the course of one night. Originally, they were going to film, or they were looking to film in Canada. I was like, okay, great, I'll make a stop there. And then, amusingly, you may not remember the great Canadian dollar like spike of 2007, whatever year it was. I think it was 2007. But basically, the summer and fall that they were supposed to film, the Canadian dollar actually topped the American dollar for the first time in history. And suddenly it was actually cheaper to film in New York with the subsidies. And they had wanted to film in New York. They just didn't think it was going to be affordable. And suddenly it was. So they ended up filming a lot of the movie 6 blocks from here, my office. It was always...
Wait, hold that thought. I'm just getting buzzed. 1 second. I'm just going to get my buzz. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. I will demonstrate my ability to drink coffee on screen. Oh my God, he's not coming back, is he? Lance, where are you? Where'd you go? You there? I don't know what to do.
Thanks, David. Sorry.
Phew. Yeah. So anyway, so they ended up
They
filming
filmed 6 blocks from you.
Yeah, 6 blocks from here. So, and because it was at night, what shooting would start at 5:30 at night. So I'd work from 8:30 to 5:30. I'd leave. I'd walk to the set. Rachel was here for a lot of it, and then basically they'd film until like 2:33 in the morning.
So cool.
And it was great. I mean, and it was fun because if you've seen the movie, it's like
I have. Yeah.
there are like 7 actors in it. Like it's not right. Like it was this big budget extravaganza where there were thousands of people on the set. It was very much like, oh, here we are at summer camp and we're all just shooting a movie.
Right.
And,
you just got to know all the actors.
Yeah, and just hang out and just watch it happen. And it was very cool.
But so my entry, when I just decided to write a YA book, it was I had just read The Hunger Games and loved it so much. And so later I discovered you edited The Hunger Games. I just want to talk about not the content of the book so much, but just this idea that The Hunger Games really, I think, was a game changer for the industry as far as just it blowing up nationwide and suddenly, YA becoming just selling even more than it had previously. And I think it continues to grow. I think it's still a growing industry. Did you see that coming as you were editing The Hunger Games? Where you're like, oh, this is gonna, make waves. Which speaks to a larger question of, do you ever really know when a book is going to hit and when it's not? What was your experience of working on it and then watching it blow up?
I mean, it was pretty amazing because I was sort of the editorial director, editor, and then Kate Egan was the real line editor.
Okay.
And then Jen Reeves was sort of the in-house editor too. So we were sort of this team of 3 people, and we had worked. Suzanne had published the Underland Chronicles here, so It was not like she was an unknown first-time author. Like we already knew and loved her, and loved just what she could do. And then she sent in the Hunger Games, and I still remember very vividly. I mean, Kate doesn't work. She works from her home in Maine, so it's just Jen and I were reading it over the weekend, and Kate was in Maine reading it. And I came in Monday morning and like walked to Jen's office and just looked at her and was like, "Holy shit!" And she was like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "Holy shit!" And like we just went back and forth, and it was so mind-blowingly good. And again, if you're in publishing, you know that there is never a direct, or never necessarily a direct correlation between mind-blowingly good and mind-blowingly successful.
Sure.
You hope for that.
Right.
But so I think we knew we had something extraordinary. We did not necessarily know what would happen. I think we thought it would do very well and people would talk about it and people would love it. But you can sort of, doing well book-wise is sort of a certain level, but doing well cultural phenomenon-wise,
right.
You'd have to be ridiculous to ever imagine that would happen. Like,
right.
I always say that one of the things that I love the most about Scholastic, which is still true to this day, is that Harry Potter happened and not a single person ever said, "Get me the next Harry Potter," or "Where's the next Harry Potter?" Like, everybody who was involved in it knew this was just this crazy alchemy of all these things coming together with this remarkable set of books. Like, you can't manufacture that. You can't go looking for that or try to create it out of something that isn't there. It just happens. And Hunger Games, it was the same way. It's all her. I mean, like, she wrote this extraordinary book, and our job was to market it really well, which we did, and get it out there, which we did. But honestly, the best thing we did for marketing is we published so many advanced readers copies, because we knew
once people
read this, the more the word will spread, and that is exactly what happened.
Cool. Well, okay, we're coming to the end of the interview. It's been very lovely. And there's three little sections left. One is going to be your advice to writers and/or aspiring editors. 2 is going to be just recommendations of books you're loving right now, or books you've edited that you think need some love. And 3 is just something called Your Time, which is really just your time to share anything, to do anything, or just whatever you want.
Okay. Sure. I will start with the advice.
Okay, great.
And I'll move to the book recommendations, and then do the
end with some good Your
free
Time.
swim.
Yeah, free swim.
All right, so advice for writers. I'm always very voluminous in this. I mean, basically it all comes down to let yourself fail and let yourself experiment, and don't put pressure on yourself to write a perfect first draft the first time. I think nowadays, especially when there's a pressure to get things out there immediately or post it or have everyone read it, people are very hard on themselves, and they let the voices saying, "Oh, that sucks," or "Oh, don't do this," really be loud in their heads. And I think I'd never get any writing done if I listened to those voices. I think most of the things that I'm proudest of in my writing came from the riskiest things that I did, and most of them I did not do it well the first time. It took revision and revision and revision, and rewriting that first chapter and rewriting that first chapter over and over again until I got it. And I think that you have to remember that. You have to remember that when you read a book, a published book, it has been revised so many times, and it has been edited so many times and proofread.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times, like, that's the standard you hold yourself to, and that's an unrealistic standard. So basically, let yourself do the messy draft, and then make it better.
Wonderful advice. Love it.
I try.
Yeah.
All right, then books to recommend. So I'm going to be unbiased. I'm sitting here in my office, so it would be really easy to pick books that I've edited, but at the same time, I'd want to go through all of them. So these are actually books that I did not work on. There is Kill the Boy Band, which is just one of my favorite movies in high school was Heathers. Love dark comedy. This is about kidnapping members of the boy band that you love. But it's about both being a fan and also being constructed as a fan by a society that wants you to be the weak girl adoring the strong boy. A little less deep thematically, but I love, we've mentioned him before, is The Haters.
Nice.
That's his new book, which anybody who's read any of my books will know that I'm musically obsessed. Like, Like, this has been very hard to me to do this interview without music playing, but I know copyright, that would be hard.
Yeah.
But so a road trip novel about kids fleeing band camp and arguing about music, but also just being really rude to each other, is right up my alley. And Jesse nails it. He is certainly one of the best authors I know about how boys talk to each other and dynamics of male friendship. And this just blew me away. And then my friend Alex's Shades of Darkness I really loved.
Cool.
This just came out earlier this year. It is sort of a weird... Is it magic realism? Is it fantasy? I don't know. You'll have to read it to find out. But it's basically about a girl in a boarding school who has a very crazy, let's call it mythological history that she is uncovering while these weird things are happening in this school.
I love that you conveniently had those stacked up.
And, well, we are in my office, so I could have grabbed, many others, which leads very nicely to... Okay, so the thing that I'm going to do is take advantage of, I'm going to do show and tell.
Oh, good.
We're here, and there are so many crazy things in my office. We just moved, but I've never really narrated them before.
Oh, it's exciting.
For example, this. Tropicana, this is a radio. For those of you born after the 80s, you might not actually know what that means, but ask your parents. They'll explain it to you. There is Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, so cool.
Can't go wrong with Scott Pilgrim. There we go. My favorite painter is my friend Nathan, and there are paintings of his all over.
Ooh.
So there's this, which is my name, which I forget when people walk into my office. They're like, "Oh, that's really great. David Sponge painted his own name." Did you do that in kindergarten? But the story is that my friend Kristen and Kristen was an editor here for 10 years at Scholastic, and every year for our birthdays, we would decorate each other's desks or offices for our birthdays. So that's cool. One year, we had gone to Paris, so she made me these wood block Eiffel Towers. So
it's amazing. You have lovely creative friends.
I do. Which is really, it's a good thing to have. Of course, we have to have some music posters. Patty Griffin, Colin Malloy, Rufus Wainwright. Interestingly, when Colin Malloy wrote his middle grade series, he went to many different publishers.
Yeah.
And literally, I got the call from reception that he was here to meet with me. And at that moment, it dawned on me that I had a poster up behind my desk. So one of my coworkers looked and saw me jumping on my desk to take down the poster in time. Colin, if you're seeing it now, that's what the empty space behind my desk was. And then, it's the drunk alien. I don't know why the alien has that expression, but look at him. And finally, there is the Katniss Barbie.
Yes.
I think when that was the moment when I was like, wow, Hunger Games really has crossed over. So that is the highlight tour.
That was
my very, very idiosyncratic office.
That was the best use of your time.
I tried.
We've had so far. Well, thank you for doing this, David. This is awesome.
No, my pleasure. Hopefully, there's enough here for you to run with.
Oh my God, it's a wealth. It's gonna have to be an hour-long episode.
Right.
I feel like I'm getting to know you in a whole new way. Really deep conversations with YA authors.